Hi, we are recording. We are laughing because we just talked for like 20 minutes and I had not hit the record button, so we are back now. And it's going to be even better because I am Cortney Chaite, by the way, and I am the founder of the Highly Sensitive Badass. And I'm here today to bring you one of the people I love most in the world, Charisse Sisou, who is the high priestess of pleasure. And I'm going to let her introduce herself because she has such a delicious way of saying it. And I love hearing her say it. So Charisse, so why don't you tell us, do your whole little intro, which I love so much. And then I'll talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Okay. Sounds wonderful. So as Brittany said, hello, I'm Charisse of claimyourfeminine.com. High priestess of pleasure to women here to change the world and chief correspondent from your happy place. My mission is simple: to populate the world with happy women. I've got my little cheat sheet here.
Tell us more.
Because there's so much important. Otherwise I forget. So to that end, I'm the founder of the Claim Your Feminine course, where I offer women tools and technologies for grounding in the sacred feminine body. And so through our pleasure, through our body's innate wisdom, we connect with our deepest passions and attract our most fervent desires. So that's where I help women break through the glass ceiling of their life and business by tapping their own magnetic nature. So how did I get into it? I started as a belly dancer. Actually, it started before that because I've always been in service to women. My degree is in women and gender studies. I ditched a pre-med neuroscience major to go into gender studies because I was so passionate. As soon as I started learning about this whole collective history and all the stuff that I hadn't learned about before, I left corporate to become, that's right, a professional belly dancer. I was an accountant. So by day, accountant, by night, a belly dancer.
Talk about two sides of the brain,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, right? Connecting the dots. Talk about that. So,
That's awesome.
That's me in a nutshell.
And I'm so excited because I wanted to bring you in because you and we do similar things, and I think we work with different people. And I work a lot with very sensitive souls, but we both work with entrepreneurs, and we both have our own way of describing what we this whole pleasure thing and reconnecting with ourselves. And it's so important for women everywhere. And I just love you have your own language of talking about it. And you really lead with pleasure as the high priestess of pleasure. And you mentioned the feminine, connecting the feminine. So who better to talk to than you about pleasure and the feminine, and the masculine. So that's really what we're going to talk about today and dive into that. And I'm really excited to get into that. So let's open with pleasure, because that's it's interesting too, because I've been talking about pleasure a lot lately. Yeah. And I get a lot of women who are almost uncomfortable with that word because they immediately think that means sexual pleasure and that we're going to be going there. And yes, it can mean that, but it's also there are a lot of notes to play with pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'd love to hear your perspective on what is pleasure and why is it so important?
So what is pleasure? And I love that you bring this up because it is something that comes up in my conversations as well. I mean, as soon as I say high priestess of pleasure, they think maybe I'm a coach or a relationship coach. And really, I'm like an integration coach. I teach women all of who they are, right? So pleasure is the full enjoyment of every experience that we have. So that can mean like the easy stuff, like biting into a delicious piece of chocolate or looking at a gorgeous sunset or playing in the warm waves off the coast of Miami, right? It
and
can
also traditionally think of as pleasure. Those are kind of the things that are more maybe obvious pleasure. If we take the sexual pleasure out of it, we think of daily pleasure. We think of it as in the positive experiences, the ones that are kind of the easy go-to pleasures that make us happy.
That's the first layer, right?
Yeah.
So it's the pleasure initiate, right? That's it. And then the next level is really enjoying stuff that maybe traditionally, conventionally, we haven't thought of as a source of pleasure. Like, for example, our full emotional range. And really, like, when the sorrow comes, like, fully experiencing it, you know, or
Aren't we
when
supposed to
something's
run
like
away
kicking
from
us off, like, huh?
run away from our feelings? I thought, like sadness and grief. Aren't we supposed
What?
to like, get the hell
Yeah.
out? Like, stop it! No, go away! Not for me.
Yeah.
No, so what do you mean? Oh my God, we can experience pleasure in our feelings, like our whole feeling range.
It is actually, like, this is so amazing because breakthroughs happen when we go to the places that scare us, right? And that's the thing with the emotions, is that we've been taught to fear our deepest emotions. And so we run the other direction, or someone at some point said, oh, that's, you know, or maybe you were 3 years old and you threw a temper tantrum, and they were like, no, that's not happening here. We're at the supermarket.
Stop.
Like, yeah. And can you blame them, right? Been there, done that. And we somehow took that message and we were like, ooh, we need to like hide this. So what happens, and especially with women, because we are, right? Like, that's the stereotype, like very emotional, irrational, blah, blah, blah. So we've been taught, oh no, to be taken seriously, to be valued, to be liked, all of those things. We've got to keep our emotional range to about there. I call it the Stepford wife range, where you're like, I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine.
Yeah, I was
ready to blow.
No, and I actually didn't even know that. I remember one therapist asked me, so do you ever get angry? And I really 100% said, no, I don't.
That's usually, that's when I take a step back. No, seriously, because it happens too. Like, I'll be in a room and I start talking about this, and there's like a bunch of women nodding their heads, and there's always that beautiful, and hey, I went through it myself. I remember like going through a lot of therapy and going back to my college, and I remember to this day the professor who inspired me to go into gender studies, who was this like larger than life lesbian, like, she was just such a powerful, like, force of nature, right? So I was like, I need to do what she's doing. So cool. I remember coming back for like a reunion of the gender studies program, and we were just like hanging out talking, and I was like, I really learned how to like process my anger. Like, I just don't go there anymore. And she's like,
I don't feel it. I'm happy now. I'm happy. I'm good.
I don't need it. And she's like, anger can be good sometimes. I'm like, I don't need it. I'm good. At the ripe old age of, I think I was like 25 or something. I was like,
I was 25 too, and I need it anymore. Happy and decided I didn't need to.
The thing is, for those of us who claim that we don't need anger, that's where it's like, just back up, because that's like, she's basically got C4 strapped to her body, and like, as a volcano, she's Pele, like ready to blow at the right. It'll be like, you know. So there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a woman with no anger. There's no such thing as a human being with no anger. So why would there be a woman with no anger? Do you know what I mean? So,
So and we disconnected from our feelings. We run away from our feelings. We sometimes are so disconnected, like I was, that we may not even be aware that we have this stuff going on, because we're like so detached and so trying to live in this happy place all the time. And what happens to us when we do this, Charisse? So that's like, can create a lot of really negative consequences in our lives.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. First of all, it takes tremendous energy, right? It takes a huge amount of energy to deny parts of yourself that are there, right? So I gave this analogy before we hit the record button, but I'm going to give it again. So like,
it was so good the first time around.
But so here the idea is, and I often use this analogy of like, it's as if someone's taken your dominant arm and tied it behind your back, but we're all going to pretend that it's not, and expect you to be able to do everything that a two-handed person can do the same way, et cetera, right? So imagine how much more energy it takes to make up for that missing piece. And the other thing too is that, like, you know what, even like the arm being tied, it's That's not a good analogy. What's better is that like I'm holding it back there. So like even just try that. Just try holding your arm back there for like the rest of this interview and see how comfortable that feels. It's like it takes energy, and after all, you're like, I really just want my arm back.
Already my shoulder hurts. I don't want to.
Right. Work with all of my facility. So what ends up happening, like there are there are certain signs. How do you know that you are a woman who is stuffing your emotions? One is depletion, like a cycle of burnout. A cycle of burnout.
Yeah. Okay. Burnout.
Yeah. So you're going, depletion or burnout. So you're like going, boom, going, boom, which is like the sign of like not having that, like we serve from our overflow, right? That's the idea. Yeah.
When we're at our best, it means that our cup is filled up and we have extra to give.
Exactly. And so by stuffing and all the energy that takes, and then also not expressing these parts of ourselves, it's very depleting.
Yeah.
What also ends up happening is it puts up barriers. Okay. So often women come to work with me and we may be working on growing their business, but one of the side effects of what's happening of their being like so in their masculine, because that's what we've been taught to like drive, go in order to make stuff happen. Then they're showing up that way in their relationships. So you've got that, plus add in that they're not fully expressing their emotions. And like, strangely, they'll have relationships where like they love each other, but they're like roommates. Or no relationship at all, and they can't seem to connect with their legendary love, and they don't know why, and there's like a lot of frustration in that area. So like passionless relationships, or that like that missing partner, and it feeling like you're limping, right? And then thirdly, one of the ways that it shows up is feeling like being so powerful, so high achieving, so all of these things, and yet not feeling fulfilled. Because the thing about emotions and expressing emotions is that it's so vulnerable. It really is. It's scary as shit, quite honestly.
I love this.
Yeah. And the thing is that when we're afraid to go there, and because when you go there, it's like opening the kimono, right? You're like, right? And suddenly you're just naked. And the thing is that, so we keep the kimono closed and we're like, I'm fine. Step for life. I'm fine. But what does this become? This becomes like a barrier to the people who are trying to love you, that you're trying to love, the people that you're here to serve. Clients. I mean, like,
we've been taught that strength, right? Like we've been taught like just dealing with it, just showing up, just, pushing it down and manning up, right? Like man up and just do it. And that's like, we've been taught that is strength, but oh my gosh, if you ask yourself how much more strength there is in the vulnerability, that is courage. It's much more courageous to actually like feel your feelings than it is to stuff them down, because it does terrify us so much, and it does open us up, and it is a more vulnerable state, and that is strength on its own. I think now, I didn't used to think this, now I realize how much stronger it is to be vulnerable than it is to like, man up and just put on a brave face and show the world that, chin up, that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a little bit getting into this idea of like the masculine versus.
Let's go there, because this is a good segue, because I want to talk a little bit about these masculine and feminine energies, and what does that mean, and does it mean, is it gender specific, or is it an energy? So will you talk a little bit about that?
Well, super interesting. So it is not gender specific. So it doesn't mean that like if you're a woman you're feminine, if you're a man you're masculine. Like you can kind of get that. We're really kind of like all over the place, and actually we each have masculine, feminine within us. Now that said, if I'm born into a female body, or really believe I feel aligned with the female, because sometimes we're born into another, and just feel really aligned with the feminine, that means that I have that like more of that feminine energy, or at least a connection to it, and alignment with it, and identification with it, right? What you were talking about, this like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and like, or like, as I like to say in my inner circle, like strapping one on in order to show up. Because I've like literally talked to corporate leaders where they're like, Charisse, I had to like strap one on just to show up every day. And I'm like, I know. I know, you got to show up as a guy because we're taught that that's the right way. That's the powerful way.
Mm-hmm.
That is a product of about 5,000 years of patriarchal mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back before that, there are tens of thousands of years where actually the feminine was revered. And my research has taken me there. It's really, really super interesting because, you know, where did all these ideas come from? Why is one held above the other? But like, just in a nutshell, about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, there was this switch. And where we had this idea of, for example, a male god. And anyway, I don't want to get into that discussion, but just to say that there's a certain inheritance that's come along with that. And part of that has been, I would say, subtle and not so subtle ways of saying that one way is better than the other, right? Yeah. So like the masculine is sort of linear and rational, right? And that is like thousands of years of evolution, right? So before even what I was talking about, which is really more like a cultural aspect, like just if we talk about the evolution of our brains, way back when, men were the hunters and women were the gatherers, right? This is so our brains evolved because what does a hunter need? A hunter needs to focus on one and one thing only. And you go after that thing. Now the thing is, the women were in the meadow with the kids. If I focused on one thing and one thing only, the children would be devoured. Or I would pick the wrong berry, you know what I mean? I'd pick the wrong berry, not prepare it in the right way, and then kill my entire family. So it was like, I had to have what's known as diffuse awareness. And in fact, our brains are set up that way. So like, you know how we have two hemispheres of the brain, and that I'm just going to say the flesh that connects them. I want to say corpus callosum, but I don't think that's right. I know I'm like going back to like my sheep brain dissecting days, but the bottom line is the connections between two hemispheres in the male brain is pretty thick. Yeah. There's a distinct definition. For women, it's like more permeable. Yeah, there's more connections going side to side, and because of that, she has something called diffuse awareness, so that she's able to see like multiple things at once. So what does that mean? That means that like this idea of focus on one thing and one thing only, it takes like wild freaking horses to get us to do that. Yeah, it's really like fighting against our nature. You're like, because like perfect example, how a guy gets things done is he has like one task that he'll like work his way through. Yeah, so a wonderful luminary in this area is Alison Armstrong. She tells a great story about her husband working on some kind of like home fix-it project, and he went to the hardware store not once, not twice, but like 5 different times to finish this one project. Like for her, it was like driving her crazy. Like, why not move on to something else? Or like, nope. But that's the masculine model. Right. The masculine way is like, nope, you got one initiative, one goal, and you keep taking steps toward it until it is complete. This is what's brilliant about that, is this like bring to completion, conclusion, bam, right? Now, we as women look at that and go, oh my God, I could have gotten like 50 different things done in the time that it's taking him to do one thing, because what do we do? Yeah. Like in that same situation, like let's say we've got a project and we take it to a point where it's like, oh, I need another tool that I don't have here. I'm gonna have to run to the hardware store. I put a pin in it and I'm like, okay, and then I work on other things. And when I've got 3 or 4 projects that all need things from the hardware store, then I go to the hardware store and I get what I need and I come bring it back, right? Yeah. It's like we are magical multitaskers. It is how we are wired, and we are brilliant at it. And you can tell when you're like in your space of like, and this, and this, and this, and it's how we're able to create. And, like we're creating all this stuff. We're like running businesses. We're taking care of clients. And at the same time, we've got like a grocery list running in our heads. And we've got dinner on the stove for later. I mean, it's like there's so much happening, right? Yeah. We're able to do that and get multiple things done. And meanwhile, he looks at us and goes, oh my God, how does she get anything done? She's just like flitting from thing to thing to thing to thing. Yeah. And it's just because we're wired differently. Our brains are literally wired differently. Yeah. but interestingly enough, that changes later in life. Like as when we get older, nature loves a good joke, and the male brain becomes more like communicative. So I decide all of a sudden he's like feeling things. He's over. He wants to talk about everything
right now.
Yes, and with women, this is why, like, you know how well, the Dalai Lama talked about how the Western woman was going to change the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone made the comment, I can't remember if he said it or if someone made the comment, the addendum to that, which is because what happens to a woman when she reaches a certain age is that connection between the brain thickens.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, she becomes bold, very focused, very clear, and like they're like, so imagine, it's so cool because like basically what happens is we get to really experience the other modality like in a really like visceral bodily way, and it makes us more complete human beings. So like all of a sudden this guy's like really vulnerable and like sharing his stuff, and it's like so beautiful, and the woman is like, no more excuses, no more tolerations. I want to wear purple, that's right, I want to do whatever, I want to show up in a bejeweled caftan with, you know, tiger stripes. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
So, it's really
so can you tell me too a little more about the qualities of the feminine and the qualities of the masculine, and how for women we have started adopting the masculine qualities as more important, for example, or, you know, or we look at the feminine qualities and we judge them as not important or, you know, weak, or, you know, whatever judgments we have, we tend to really judge the feminine and idealize the masculine, and women and men are both doing this. So in many ways, we have men and women all walking around in their masculine, which leads to a lot of disconnection in relationships also.
Yes.
And, just a lot of unhappiness for women right now. So do you mind sharing a bit of that wisdom with us today?
Yeah. So, well, I think we are pretty familiar with masculine qualities because those are the qualities that we prize, right?
Yeah. So what are some of those?
Focus, self-sufficiency, that sort of very driven, goal-oriented nature, right? One of the things about men that's so brilliant about them and what makes them so effective is this, they're really able to stand within themselves. This will make more sense when I start talking about what happens on the feminine side. So, but he can really like be his own man, like hold on to his individuality, right? And this is really prized, right? Be an individual, be who you are, don't be swayed by the crowd, like right now. And it's wonderful, and there's things to learn from that. And there's like the feminine side, which is
so what are some of those qualities?
Some of the qualities is like we have an undeniable sense of our interconnectedness as people, right? It has to do with the permeability of the brain that I talked about. It has to do with our diffuse awareness. It has to do with our empathy and so we see the connections between people. Because of that, the shadow side of that, like we'll often lose ourselves because we're like, well, what does this person want? What does this person need? What is that? You know, we're so acutely aware of not just ourselves, right? So that's like one of the differences between like masculine and feminine. But you can also see how that's incredibly valuable, right? To be able to know, wait a minute, we're having a conversation, but Timmy over here is like, he's really struggling with something. Let's come and meet that. And what's really interesting, speaking of like masculine and feminine, what's prized and what's not, is that I've had in sort of like in one of my past iterations and businesses and stuff, I've had the privilege of interviewing like captains of industry, like C-level executives, meaning C-suite, like CEO, CFO, COO, all those wonderful people. And often they're men. And then what's really interesting are the qualities that they're talking about, that I'm writing about for them, is their collaboration, their collaborative spirit. They are so invested in their teams and are not leaving anyone behind. They are connected with their intuition.
Mm-hmm.
What does this sound to you like? These are feminine superpowers.
And you
Okay.
know what I'm thinking too as I go, because I have a very highly sensitive audience, empath. These are the qualities that are superpowers for sensitive people as well, that have
Yeah.
also been really, as growing up in our culture, have been, really criticized. And we have really learn to think those are bad qualities, like our empathy, our compassion, our ability to feel deeply. And it shows to other people. I think they've seen that as weakness. And we've heard, oh, you're so sensitive, you're so sensitive. And it sounds like these are very similar in a way to the feminine qualities. And it can be really challenging because I think that we have been taught, no, 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 we don't really think that's okay. And we respect a more masculine way of being in the world. So it's interesting for the sensitive listeners out there as well, that I think that this is very much in line with things we've probably heard growing up as well. But that's an interesting thing with your C group people.
Exactly. Like what your sensitive superpowers are not that different from the superpowers, like feminine superpowers.
Right.
And we're just not used to thinking of them as superpowers because it's like, no, you should be able to figure it out. So like, as you were talking, I was reminded how, like that masculine model is like very much from the neck up, right? It's like we figure things out and we do it, right? Even the way that we meditate is masculine. It's like from the top down. Women's energy comes from the bottom up. Yeah. So you can read about this in Dr. Christiane Northrup's Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. She talks about it. But what that means is, or what I want to say is, there are different ways of knowing, right? This is what we tap into with our intuition, with our imagination, which is another word for our intuition, with our desires, which is another name for intuition. Do you know what I mean?
Which is also another word that I think has become sexualized. It's interesting. I use the word desire, and that's another one. People are like, what? Desire. I'm like, no, desire can be like, I desire to take a nap. It's like it's yeah.
I desire a 7-figure business.
Yes.
I desire earth-shattering sex. Like, they're all desires. But yes, it's
desire. My closer right now.
Isn't it interesting though, because what's so interesting to me is that, like, really when we talk about masculine, feminine, different ways of knowing, different intelligences, what always comes through for me is like, we've spent a lot of time in our heads. And in fact, like, the primary benefit that women come back to me and say is like, oh my God, Charisse, you got me out of my head and back into my body, because that's where our deepest wisdom lies. That's where our highest intelligence lies. Like, speaking of intuition or like hunches, like when you get, like, our bodies are so much smarter than we are. Like, they're just way ahead of the curve. Like, you'll start to feel that, like, the hackles rising on the back of your neck, or you'll get goosebumps.
Yes, right.
Or the tears will well, or you'll like
that gut
feel
feeling.
That gut feeling. Exactly. Like, we feel it in our bodies first, and then our brain goes, oh wait, what is that about? Like, what's happening? Right? So this is a little bit that difference between the masculine is like, our power very often lies in our body and connecting with that. Like, any woman who has given birth has experienced viscerally what happens when we take our hands off the steering wheel and surrender to the absolute perfection of our bodies, and how they know exactly what to do. And as long as we know how to, like, stop trying to control it and make it happen a certain way, magical things happen, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yes, it does. I have to apologize. My dog, I have to lock him out of my office area, but then he sits out and he barks. Otherwise, he'd be jumping in my lap, trying to get out. So if you hear this, like, annoying, sweetly annoying thing, it's my dog barking in the background. So just a heads up about that. But yes, this is so true. And I think many of my clients come to me and they're just stuck in their heads, chit chat all the time. And, you know, I am the same way. I think we all tend to be so stuck in our heads, and we try and think our way out of everything. And if we would just learn to tap into our body and get into our body, then, oh, now I know what to do. It's so amazing, the power of this. And this kind of segues back to pleasure, because pleasure really is self-care. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like the quickest, shortest way is through the body. In fact, I mean, I would even say that like pleasure is a bodily experience, right?
Using all your senses, igniting every sense that you have in different ways, delighting your senses. It can be very pleasurable.
Right? Like, we can't really journal our way to pleasure. Does that make sense? Like we can come to.
It might be pleasurable to journal.
Yeah, exactly. That's well put. Like it is so.
But it's different than
like, and it's like, it immediately takes you out of your head, out of the monkey mind, right? That we're all so familiar with, or like that perfectly photoshopped woman that sits on your shoulder and like critiques you. I think we all have one of her. And, you know, like the way to tune that out, like, and become present is inevitably always through the body. And like pleasure as a tool, as a technique, it's more like as a goal, as the pattern to which we want to return, right? Because it means like, okay, now I'm in that space. Now I'm in that space of creativity, of play, of fun, right? Because when we're here, it's just like.
And that's such a great way of saying it. It's like play, fun, you know, all of those, you know, and I know we talked about pleasure, that we can feel pleasure going through kind of some of the darker feelings we might have too. But on the flip side, it is like it's more of my body changes when I even talk about it. Like when I talk about pleasure, I just notice myself, I'm like, ooh, and and then when you talk about like fun and laughter, like I get brighter, I get hot, you know, it just lifts you up more. So that is really a different energy, and bringing a higher energy to yourself. A way of moving through the lower energies too in pleasure. You can, it's very broad.
So this is also how we connect with our feminine. This is like, because pleasure for a woman is like oxygen.
Yeah.
We try to pretend like it's not, but if you take that off the menu, you can tell. She turns into the like, I'm fine.
Yes.
Right?
And do you find that a lot of your women feel guilty thinking about pleasure? Like, oh, it's selfish, and because I get this all the time, right? Yeah. Why is it not selfish, Charisse?
Oh my gosh, let me tell you why it's not selfish. Because here's the thing, you have, as a woman, you impact so many people. Whether you are an entrepreneur, like reaching hundreds, or you're a mom reaching your family, it doesn't matter. Your life touches so many lives as you go through your day. Now, here's the thing. We are very aware of the impact when she's not a happy camper. What is happening? Daisies are withering in her path. Small children are running and hiding. Like, it's like
scary mommy. Like when
scary mommy. Yeah.
Scary mommy shows up, and I'm like, you guys, you might want to just give me a little space, because scary mommy's here, and that is when I have not been taking care of this, and that.
Exactly. Like when we are not taking care, when we are not filling up with pleasure, where do we go? We go to scary mommy. Like that's what we're like. Rrr.
That's just and then there's
everyone can feel it. Huh?
Irritable, complaining friend, and then they're like, whoever we become in our different roles is like not the same person that we would be like filled up with pleasure, right?
Exactly. And so what happens, the like immediate impact of weaving pleasure through your day and making it a priority is that you have so much more to give. And the people around, like they feel it. A woman in her pleasure is like, she's a blessing to be around. Do you know what I mean? I mean, and even my definition of flirting, and I think we share this definition, is like, it's really just thoroughly enjoying yourself, like so 100% enjoying yourself. And it just happens to be in the presence of someone else. And guess what? They like it.
It's magnetic
energy. Yeah, it's magnetic. When you raise your energy, it raises their energy. Right. And it's like, it's like your natural magnetism, your natural like irresistibleness,
Yeah.
that gets tapped when we tap into our pleasure. And
Can I
like,
tell you a funny story?
yeah.
Okay, so I was out to dinner with my kids last night and the waiter came over and I was just like friendly, I was enjoying myself and my daughter looks at me who's 10 and she says, "Mom, I think he likes you." And my son, of course, was like, "Stop it." He's like totally uncomfortable all of a sudden. But I told my daughter, I was like, "You know what, babe, maybe, but I think I'm just like happy and friendly. And so I think he's therefore happy and friendly and wants to be nice back to me." And like, so it's interesting. It is like, it's a magnet, how what you put out there kind of like, it opens other people up and it gives them permission to be happy and to feel good. And
Yeah.
So that was really, really cute. And
Yeah, no, it's so huge. And this, like, it's not selfish at all. And I can share a story from my own experience, which is, because you can also see it, you can see how it raises the energy, but also, like, for example, if you have someone in your circle who is suffering right now. And so when, as my daughter was struggling with depression, I at first was like, all self-care went out the freaking window. I was like, nope, I've got to, like, everything told me like, no, you need to focus on her and put all your energy into that. And, and I've shared with other moms who went through the same process of like basically throwing themselves like out with the bathwater, right? Like if they're the baby, they're out with the bathwater and trying to like just pour themselves into this. And it backfired. It backfired because I had less and less and less to give. I couldn't show up and be the mom that she needed if I was completely tapped out and impatient and irritable and all that stuff. And like, who are you modeling for? Right? It's like, who's like your daughter, your son, right? Who's paying attention?
Well, that was my big aha for me was that, with my daughter, realizing that I was modeling the self-sacrificing martyr and thinking that it was in her best interest, right? Thinking it was like for her. And then I realized that I was deeply unhappy and that if she was seeing me do that, she was going to take it in, and that think that's how she had to be as a mom, and then she would be self-sacrificing, repeating the same pattern unconsciously, because that's what was modeled to her. And that was my like, ooh, no, I actually really want her to be like a really happy woman and fully expressed. And so that was like my kind of like, oh, maybe I need some change. Maybe something needs to shift in my life. So it's so true. What we model is so important for everyone around us too. And when we model that, even for our friends, for the people we love.
So not selfish at all. In fact, it's selfish to deny yourself pleasure.
I agree so wholeheartedly.
I said it out loud. Because and I say this speaking from experience. So this is not like this is not a judgment at all.
Right. Me too.
When I've denied myself pleasure, and then I've been a bitch or like not had enough to do what I wanted to do, not had enough energy or confidence to like expand into my next. That was me being selfish. Quite it was a cop out is what it was. It was like a way out, like, oh, I'm too tired, too depleted, too this, too that. I can't do it.
And no judgment at all too, because both of us have been there. We have very similar, similar and different. Everyone's kind of similar and different, I think. But also we were never taught this. I think we're all really trying to learn this as we get older. So it's no one's fault whatsoever. No judgment at all, because we just don't know any better. We really don't until we're taught. And so, being open to the teaching is so important, and realizing there's a different way that we can be in the world. And it's pretty liberating. And one thing that's important to me, because I am married and I have a son, is it's not like male bashing. This isn't about like denying at all, because I think that can be misinterpreted sometimes when we talk about the feminine, is that it can be like either or. it's like the feminine is rising. And I think men are probably like, oh God, what does that mean for me? Like, does that mean that men can also be powerful? And it's like,
Yeah,
no.
I can totally speak to that, because it is
Yeah.
not about one being over the other at all. It's about bringing back into balance. That's really all it is. And it's like, you know, like I highly prize what the men in my life bring in.
Yeah, because you're married, you have a son also.
Yeah, I'm married, I have a son, surrounded by men, my brother. And like, it's about bringing into balance. And the thing is that like when we're out of balance, it doesn't just hurt women. Like it also hurts men. Like, you know, like my husband has said to me, like, I wish I could cry like you could, like you can. I'm like, you can, honey.
Yeah.
You know, and part of our roles and why we show up different is so that he can teach me about, like, I don't know, leisure time, which is, I don't know about you, like something I've noticed about myself and about every woman that I know is that we go until we just can't go anymore, and then we like kind of pass out. And what I so appreciate about men is that they are like, they get to the end of their activity time and they're like, and now I am resting. That is what I am doing. And you can, I mean, and it's like that, it's just it. And so, you know, kind of like
resting is like a feminine quality, and women are like, no, I have to do it. I can't rest. I have to go. So in some ways, men are sometimes better at embracing that feminine quality than.
Oh my God. There's a lot of reasoning behind that too. I go further into it in my course where I talk.
I know
about,
we have to wrap up in like 5
minutes.
I know. We could talk like a whole other one.
Easily, we could easily talk all day. But yeah, it is. I so admire and love the men in my life, but it's so funny. Like there is that perception. Like I still remember in college. I mean, yes, I was a women and gender studies major, but it was not a popular major. How many people do you know have that degree? Right?
Well, I went to Vassar, so like a lot of people.
Like and it was like, what?
I went to Vassar, so there was like that was a lot for me, but not. I would say the everyday person is probably not so much.
Right.
Yeah.
I was at Amherst, which used to be an all-male school until the 70s when they started letting women in. And then, so it was still, it's like a fairly new at that time area of study. And I still remember a student being like, oh yeah, this was a guy. And I'm not bashing guys here, it just happened to be a gentleman. But he was like, oh yeah, I could pass that course. You just write, I hate men at the top of the page. I'm like, no, actually.
No, men, we love you. Yeah.
It's not that easy.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say, and then we'll talk more about where people can find you. I guess I think we said it already, but we'll wrap up with that too, is that it's interesting. My relationship has changed a lot. I have become more vulnerable and really embraced a bit my femininity that I was like, And my husband is now actually able to share with me more. He feels safe. It's so weird. I'm kind of like, wow, it's like we've become a lot closer because I think he feels he can share more with me, and he's changing. It's so interesting. I think he's safe sharing things with me that he never did before, and I was wanting to, and I would always ask, but it's really amazing the little changes that you'll notice in your life that you never anticipated would change when all of this stuff gets put into practice. It's so amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've seen the same thing happen in my relationship. With my guy of just, he has that space, like he's connecting with his intuition, and then I appreciate him about it, so he does it more. It's like
right.
It makes everyone better, is what I'm saying. And it's like, and it's
that's why it's not selfish.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just it makes it better for everyone across the board, and it makes it better for you, like so much more fun.
Right? Life is much more fun. Much more fun. So thank you so much for this amazing, amazing time. I have had a great time talking to you, as always. Once again, I'm Cortney. If you are coming at this not knowing who I am at all, Cortney Chaite with the highlysensitivebadass.com. And Charisse, where can people find you?
So people can find me on my website at claimyourfeminine.com. You can learn more about my course there. can cure. You can also find me on Facebook at Claim Your Feminine. I do nightly live videos at 7 o'clock Central every single weeknight. Little tools and technologies for grounding in the feminine. So find me on Facebook, find me on my website, and I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you, Cortney. What a great time. I knew it would be. It would be so fun.
Right? Like we were not going to not have fun together. So this.
Right. I know. We get here. Oh, we've got to do an interview.
Oh, yay. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, reach out to one of us. We are here for you and serving your pleasure and serving your growth. So thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you soon. Bye. I'm going to stop the recording now. Bye.